Hi everyone. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Pietro Moran as part of our Crypto Trailblazers episode. Pietro is the director of Crypto at Shift4, and I'm really excited about this conversation because we're going to have the opportunity to talk about the partnership between Zero Hash and Shift4, and more importantly, what Pietro and the team are building at Shift4 in terms of their one-stop fiat and crypto solution. So, yeah, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today, Pietro.
Anytime, Sean. Likewise, really excited about the conversation and appreciate getting the chance to chat with you today.
Perfect. So I think the whole premise behind Crypto Trailblazers was to bring on leaders from the traditional space that are pioneering in terms of crypto. So I wanted to kick things off initially by exploring your motives at Shift4 for moving into crypto. So if you could give us an introduction and an overview of Shift4's journey to crypto so far.
Absolutely. Never shy about giving an overview of the company and always appreciate the opportunity to do so. Shift4 has a pretty storied history in payment processing and in the payment space generally. We're a leader in integrated payments in the United States. Historically, we've been around over 25 years, particularly in verticals around hotels, restaurants, F&B, stadiums are another a keen area where we succeed and thrive. And a couple of years ago, as you mentioned, the Giving Block was acquired, which is a company that I was a part of. And I think it was twofold. The rationale is one, the Giving Block had access to a few kind of key marquee clients in the nonprofit space, which were attractive from a payment processing perspective. But as we dug into the synergies between the companies, we recognized that there was quite a bit of greenfield space for us to enter the crypto vertical as really a way to service what are considered high risk merchants, but in reality just leveraging the expertise that Shift4 and the team has built to service a new category where we feel like we have a considerable edge. And so 2 years ago roughly, we were acqui-hired into Shift4, and in tandem Shift4 also acquired a bank in Europe that allowed for us to have a more global presence and service customers on an international scale, which I think is directly relevant to crypto, considering that it's money on the internet and there is no geography where it's limited to outside of regulations. So at that point, we had kind of considered what our opportunities were in this space, and we found that being a card processor for crypto merchants who are historically a bit underserved in that department was definitely another avenue for our expansion. And building on top of that progress, it funneled into our partnership with Zero Hash and launching our own crypto native on-ramp product, which we're super excited about.
Yeah, us too. Really looking forward to elaborating and talking more deeply about the partnership between Zero Hash and Shift4. And I think one of the things that you touched upon that I just want to lean into a bit more deeply is you mentioned around trying to fix some of the issues that crypto merchants were experiencing in terms of connecting, I guess, fiat to the crypto economy. From your perspective, I wanted to explore this with a double lens, if you like. The first lens is, why is it important as an industry that we're able to improve and optimize the merchant experience?
Ooh, I could talk about this ad nauseum, so I really appreciate the question. When I think about crypto, and in particular the use case of fiat to crypto, right? When you think about the expansion of our industry, and I say our industry is a crypto industry, I consider myself a little more crypto native than I am a payments person. Been in crypto a bit longer than I've been in payments. But when you think about conversion of fiat to crypto, that's really the lifeblood of how the industry grows, right? And when you consider everyone looking for access and exposure or diversification into this asset class, it requires that first onboarding step of how do I take my stored value in whatever format it might be on my credit or debit card from a bank account, and how do I get that into a crypto native asset? We think that's a really important place to be a part of the flow of funds, because that is what is going to allow for the industry to grow and reach that sort of mainstream adoption level or tenured adoption where it's a consistently growing industry as opposed to a novelty that was internet native. And how does that parlay itself into the merchant experience, right? Historically, we've noticed that due to lack of regulatory guidelines, lack of, say, interest or appetite for risk taking to service this industry, the crypto industry, merchants in this industry have been historically a bit pushed aside or not serviced to the caliber or with the caliber of service that we would hope to see in traditional markets. And so when you think about the comparison of, say, onboarding a restaurant or onboarding a merchant that's doing e-commerce or something more traditional, that looks a lot different than it does for a crypto merchant. And that, has a lot of things baked into it. One is like, what are you quoting them from a commercial standpoint, right, to justify the risk of getting in? What even is the risk or the perceived risk of a crypto merchant, right? What are they doing? And also like complying with non-uniform regulatory standards that often impose or introduce cost or complexity to a process that should otherwise be seamless and pretty straightforward. What we've taken the approach of doing is saying, we're not here for 2, 3, 5 years to service this industry when there's a bull market or when things are very attractive from a commercial perspective, but we want to be a long-term partner that's incentive aligned to watch this industry grow and actually help be that sort of traditional player that is taking a concerted effort to enter the space and really try to level the playing field as it pertains to that merchant experience. And we hope to be accomplishing that goal.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just based on what you were describing there, what would be interesting to understand is, you mentioned your mission is to provide an end-to-end payment solution across a diverse range of industries, as you just described. Mm-hmm. What does that mean in practical terms for crypto, for the long-term longevity and sustainability of the business?
Awesome question, because I love the opportunity to talk at both a granular level, but also, at a high level and look at the future. So I think of it as a few different steps, right? And one of the constraints is, I guess, how quickly we can move and innovate and iterate, which is partially why we, partnered with Zero Hash, of course. It's that speed to market kind of factor. But how it pertains to crypto merchants and just crypto users generally is, one, from our more traditional business side on card acquiring, just giving merchants a better experience, better approval rates, and a better process of orchestrating and implementing their payments when users come to their platform and just pay with a credit or debit card. Taking that one step further, you could think about the product that we're building together, which is an on and off ramp, which is geared a little bit more towards crypto native users, perhaps folks who have used an on ramp before, or even new entrants that are looking at a way to kind of seamlessly swap their fiat into crypto. What does that really achieve? I think it achieves a few things, in the sense that, one, you want that experience to be seamless, easy, frictionless, right? You think about the traditional fintech apps that we use to pay each other already, like a Venmo or Square or some of the other peers that we have in that industry. When you think about how seamless and easy that experience is, we need to replicate that for crypto, or else it isn't a 10x improvement, even if the technology is potentially better or there. And so we want to try to institute ourselves as a player in the space that is trying to create this product of an on-ramp, but with the same form factor or experience that a new entrant to crypto would still feel comfortable using, and would have those expectations of things like the speed, the checkout time, the just approval rates on your cards, not having that frictionful user experience. And when you think about at scale, right, crypto, and in particular stablecoins, for at least the time being, is a really interesting payments form factor. I'd say it's probably one of the most interesting things in the industry writ large. And from a payments company perspective, right, we want to be on the innovative side of history as opposed to playing catch up to our peers. And so we think of it as allowing for fiat to come into the system, for folks to become comfortable within crypto and crypto native use cases, and then even at scale and at maturity, allowing for crypto as a payments form factor over time, which we feel very excited about in terms of the potential, because there's a lot of things there that become more seamless and that the technology facilitates in terms of settlement time, speed, even cost when it comes to cross-border remittance use cases, or just sending money between folks across different geographies. We're taking a look at all of those things and kind of assessing opportunities across, what we're currently building and what we could build over the future state.
Yeah, there's some really interesting points that you touched upon there. And as you said, in terms of being an early mover into the space, we're now starting to see more of a trend of traditional payments platforms and companies start to contemplate or develop their crypto strategy in whatever form that might take, whether it's a fiat to crypto on-ramp, using stablecoins as a settlement mechanism, or embedding crypto rails to do cross-border or facilitate cross-border payments, for example. And I'm hoping that the audience from this are people that are starting to think through that strategy. So I'd love to double click on that part in terms of you've gone through that experience and that exercise. Mm-hmm. Are there any key lessons that you learned in the process of building your version 1.0, which is your Fiat to Crypto on-ramp, and what the future roadmap might look like?
Absolutely. It's been a very, I would say, didactic experience. You don't know what you don't know until you take the plunge. So I'd say the first thing is educating yourself and having some relevant knowledge that can support any internal efforts, making sure that you align key stakeholders within your organization. I think that started when we were acquired into Shift4 as a crypto company. Having that expertise and having built those relationships in the space already gave us a bit of a leg up in terms of not only brand recognition of the team, but also understanding the playing field. It can be a very different world when you jump into, say, the crypto landscape as opposed to the traditional fintech or payment space. What I think is really key to understanding there is, one, I think you need to start with achievable outcomes because there's quite a diverse roadmap of things that you could accomplish. And so not having the analysis paralysis of saying we need to do everything all at once is super critical. We thought that starting with an acquiring portfolio of crypto merchants, becoming comfortable with that, and then pivoting into this on and off ramp is the trajectory that we felt the most in tune with. And then, from there, I think that most folks looking at this need to understand, I think, two things. The first being, one, the demand generation or the demand for this product is definitely global and very, I would say, cross-border in nature, right? Payments flowing over the internet is something that we, have had in the form of crypto for a long time, but actuating that and leveraging sort of the benefits of your historical business practices, I think can be very, enlightening. And to put that into perspective, right? Shift4 was not a crypto company. It was founded, and I wouldn't say it's a crypto company by nature. It's a traditional company that is coming into crypto and leveraging all of the key learnings of, say, 25 plus years of experience and bringing them in. I think we need to see more of that. And while I think the natural crypto native incumbents are going to thrive and do very well, I think there is a mutually beneficial relationship of connecting traditional rails to crypto, even if the future at some point far down the line is crypto native, right? And I think building those bridges is important. I'd say the second thing to recognize is really just what the industry is really looking for as opposed to what is easy to do, and trying to go above and beyond to provide the best merchant experience. I think a lot of our past learnings, just assessing the industry, was that folks were keen to come in when crypto was in vogue and it was during a bull cycle or prices were going up, and so they recognized that as an opportunity to add revenue to the balance sheet. But then when the tide pulls out or when things get difficult, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge, right? I would say recognizing and taking into account what looks like consistent and achievable linear growth in those times of difficulty and still being around then is what will allow you to entrench yourself in the industry as opposed to being a fly-by-night service provider.
Yeah, it's really interesting, a few points that you mentioned. So if I compartmentalize that, to your point, the first part is we have to have some mechanism to get people from fiat to crypto, which is the whole purpose and premise behind the Fiat to Crypto on-ramp that you've built, and it'll be good to explore that in more detail shortly. But to your point, the second point is actually coming into the industry with that lens of saying, we're going to focus on enabling real-world use cases and unlocking utility. And I just wanted to explore that part because that's quite unique in terms of, as you mentioned, when you're in a bull market, and you could probably argue we're in a bit of a bull market right now and things can get frothy, but maintaining that uber focus, we're here to enable those real-world use cases. How were you thinking through that when you started to think about your Fiat to Crypto on-ramp?
It's a great question because I don't think there was really a lot of enthusiasm for crypto when we jumped into this, which I would say was to our advantage. I think a lot of people would find difficulty motivating internal stakeholders or looking at this industry and saying, okay, Bitcoin is under 20K, for example. Why do we really want to jump into this when it seems like the market is, left its toys at the park and gone home, right? now with the benefit of hindsight looking back, and I think we touched Bitcoin all-time highs today very momentarily, the fruits of that effort have started to, bear themselves, which is great. What I think, we really wanted to do, and what we really saw as a couple key metrics that were really enticing to us, is when you look at sort of the year over year or cycle over cycle growth in total, let's just say amount of wallets being used or monthly active users on something like a MetaMask, for example, or people that are interacting with the technology regardless of the price, that's super motivating and something to look at. And then when you look at the volumes as it pertains to fiat still looking for a crypto outlet, even if it's something like stablecoins in a non-speculative sense, right? A real world utility use case, or just a dollarizing kind of your bank account kind of use case. I think that was also very enlightening to us. There's a great stat that a friend of mine, Nick Carter, put out in one of his presentations that said, stablecoins are settling as much or more value than Visa in any given year. When you think about that, right, these are not micro trends anymore. They may be when you dissect the data and look at a country by country basis, or look at the penetration of the potential user base. And the payment space is very large, right? When you talk about trillions of processed payments on any given year, you might wonder to yourself, well, is this still a trend worth following? But when you look at the annual growth rates in that settlement volume, you can clearly see that this is a sticky use case and product that we really wanted to tackle. We don't see that trend necessarily abating anytime soon. And I think that as we get more regulatory clarity as well, we'll have more and more confidence pushing the boundaries of what we can offer from a product perspective. I think, concerted and, let's just say, sober growth expectations are very healthy early on, because every time you jump into a new industry, it can be a bit of a challenge. But with the benefit of, say, 18 months of doing this or building this, we feel like we had made the correct bet on the future kind of direction of the industry.
Yeah, and as you said, it puts you in an advantageous position now as well, especially to your point around stablecoin adoption being at parity with Visa. And interestingly enough, we've just launched a survey, and I'm just waiting for the full results to come in. But the preliminary results across Latin America in particular, so we did Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. What I found really intriguing was we asked them around using stablecoin or crypto for everyday payments. So subscriptions that they currently subscribe to, Netflix or CRM platforms, because the audience was freelancers and gig economy workers. Mm-hmm. And actually 42% said they would prefer to pay in stablecoins or crypto, and 52% said they would like to have the option, which to me was really mind-boggling, because essentially there's 8% of the audience left that want to pay in the traditional fiat currency. And then we were also asking them around how much of their earnings they would like to receive in crypto or stablecoins. So you're right, it feels like there's a path towards becoming a crypto native world, but fundamentally, companies or platforms like Shift4 providing that connectivity between fiat and crypto, that's an essential role. And I know that you and I partnered on a trust report and how important consumers believe, or the perception is, of traditional companies to facilitate that transition. So I wanted to sort of change gears a moment, and you mentioned the partnership between Zero Hash and Shift4. I just wanted to talk briefly about that. What were the capabilities that you identified that Zero Hash were going to bring to the table that would enable you to accelerate your time to market, or build the product that was going to help you differentiate in the market as well from other fiat to crypto on-ramp players in the space?
Absolutely. Just a quick point on the comment you just made, which I think is extremely astute and great to see kind of borne out in the data, right? When you look at the, I would say, divide or the gap between what service provider sentiment might be versus what real world user sentiment might be, right? That is in some cases an opportunity, right? There's clearly a need or clearly a desire for this, type of payments form factor, or just a more seamless way to get your dollars or other fiat currency into crypto. But then what you see as well is, the amount, and I don't want to turn this into a macro podcast, right? But you see the amount of volatility in global markets, and you see the amount of volatility in currencies generally, right? when you think about the dollar as a concept or stablecoins as a concept, for geographies that are, say, non-US or non-dollarized nations, we see that a payments form factor where you can store your value in something independent of your local currency can be quite attractive. But I digress, right? I think that's a trend that we're witnessing, and from a payments perspective can be attractive if you're at the nexus of consumer demand and provisioning what they look for. But ultimately, to your question about zero hash, I mean, there was a few considerations that we had. We were shopping around ideas of whether do we buy, build, partner when it comes to a crypto product, right? Because Shift4 is incredibly adept at integrated payment systems, but relatively new to building crypto native payment systems. And so when we were exploring and doing this thought exercise, it made a lot of sense to find a partner that could give us not only sort of the assurances of being a well-regulated, well-understood, known commodity in the space, but also that had the platform that allowed us to be turnkey and move with the speed and agility that we would hope for. I think if we were to build everything on our own, it was an entirely different consideration and timeline and even roadmap. And when it came to zero hash, I think the combination of just licensing the technology, the platform, what it enabled us to do and what it enabled us to stay good at, meaning, I'm a huge a fan of letting sort of the diversification or specification of labor play out. Instead of being a jack of all trades, do what you do very well and partner with other folks that are the leaders in that space. And so that has borne out into our partnership, which I think has been, fruitful to this day. And ultimately, I think, folks that might be considering a partnership or looking at, alternatives to their current solution would do well just to survey the landscape in terms of what's out there and what is probably best for your long-term growth. I think there are ways to go to market very quickly that maybe aren't the most pristine or buttoned up. I think that working with zero hash was, to our benefit across all of those categories and continues to be so. So I think, matching our pace of play and moving in a global environment and global market was part of it. It was a portion of the technology and just what it enabled us to do in a relatively turnkey way. And then having the assurances of really, a well-defined brand and understood name and, not worrying about whether you guys would keep the lights on next year,
Yeah, definitely. And there's a point that you just triggered in my mind as well. As you said, there's a certain pace of play that Shift4 likes to abide by. But equally, there's just a pace of play that exists in the crypto economy. If you look at stable coins, pretty embryonic right now, a lot of US dollar-denominated stable coins. I've been reading a lot of material recently where people think this year there's going to be a lot more currencies that are going to be in the form of stable coins, Japan, the UK, Europe, as examples. And then layer on top of that, you've got a multi-blockchain universe to contend with as well. So in terms of, I don't want to get too lost down the track here either, but if you think about that world, what does that mean in payments? What's the importance of being able to support payments across multiple different stable coins and across different blockchains? I'd love just to get your thoughts on that.
You bring up a great point because I don't think that a crypto isn't a panacea, right? There isn't a one solution that's just the ultimate solution. But that being said, when you think about who the most important person in the equation is, it's the customer, right? Or the merchant that you're servicing and what they facilitate for their customers and where demand meets supply, really, in the sort of high level economic sense. I think for us, we want to enable as many form factors or payment methods or currencies on the inbound, because that's ultimately what's going to lead to that global adoption, right? If we say that we're going to create a solution that's only available in dollars and only available for dollar stablecoin holders, you by nature limit the total addressable market that you can serve. Now, I think there needs to be a discussion, internally at every company, considering this as to, what the right amount of growth and rollout is, because you can get lost in the opportunities and launches and choices in the space, right? But that being said, I think we take the position that the more you can enable that fiat to crypto conversion across multiple currencies, multiple payment methods, and multiple form factors, the more that you ingratiate yourself to your customer and the more that you cultivate that relationship with your end user that shows that we're building not only for what's interesting right now, but what might be interesting, right? I think any entrepreneur or any business person is always thinking in the present, but also thinking in the future and trying to anticipate to, ideally surprise and delight, as they say, right, your customer. I think that, to the benefit or to the credit rather of Zero Hash, we've always pushed in terms of what we want in terms of functionality internally and with our partners to try to aggressively meet those demands or anticipate those future demands. And like you said, crypto is 24/7, 365. And so we needed a partner that is thinking about, okay, which new blockchains are we integrating or which new fiat currencies are we going to onboard and allow for? That's a really important factor that I think has been maybe understated, because I think a lot of crypto folks think about the US and Europe as major markets, but we're recognizing very quickly now that the rest of the world really wants access to the asset class, but also wants to do so in a native or let's just say recognizable form factor that we need to try to meet that demand. So I think that's just a long-term growth strategy, is do what the customer wants and do it well. And I think that has historically played to our benefit.
Yeah, definitely. I agree completely. And just to sort of wrap up on that basis then, as you said, Shift4 has a reputation in terms of supporting multinational companies with their global commerce strategy and payments infrastructure. So without revealing your product roadmap or anything, is there anything that's interesting that you're exploring this year because you're seeing certain trends, or to your point, there's a demand and therefore you want to provide the supply?
Yeah, I love living in the world of conjecture, but I can only say so much. I think there's a few threads or trends that I would touch on in this regard. One is your geographic expansion and coverage. I don't think that being a very niche provider in an industry that lives on the internet with no geographical constraints is the winning strategy. So the amount that we can move all over the world and have that seamless experience, whether you're in the North American region, Asia Pacific, or Europe, doesn't really make a difference to me. I think of it as one unified product that hopefully everybody can use. Not trying to target any specific geography. So I think that's important. I think ultimately, one of the key, let's just say, other trends that I've taken note of is, what do people want to do with their crypto, and thinking about enabling those use cases for a broad audience. So for example, America, you may think of luxury goods as one of the markets that you are really excited to leverage your crypto gains for payments, for example. But that may be very different than, say, buying a coffee or just paying your local merchant in a different country. I'd say tapping into the zeitgeist of demand in any region is really important, so that you know how to make an entry in that specific region. I think, longer term, would I love to see the opportunity to pay with crypto anywhere in the world? Especially from a stablecoin perspective to start, I think that's very interesting and very sought after. So that demand is something that we're taking keen interest in. And then I think at the end of the day, right, when you think about crypto native merchants that are looking for a service provider as opposed to the end customer who may be using it in their day-to-day life, understanding the challenges and meeting the needs of what is effectively a multinational, right? Because you're servicing customers on a grand basis. The complexities that come with that and servicing them at a high level, puts pretty significant demands on us as a payments company. I think working to understand those challenges and really build for the long term is the crucial, I'd say, differentiator between those that are successful and those that'll maybe have some success but never fully penetrate the market. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, but when you consider what, say, a large global crypto exchange needs from a payments processing perspective, you're covering quite a bit of ground there. And then when you think about a local merchant in any given country that maybe wants to accept stablecoins, you're looking at a totally different demand profile, and optimizing your product or suite of products for those individual use cases is super important. But then if you can collate that into one kind of integrated experience where you come to a vendor like us or one of our peers and you say, these are all the different things I need, and having a specific solution to each of those problems, I think puts you, at least with the right to win, what is a pretty exciting opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to finish and summarize the conversation as well, as you said, because when crypto or Bitcoin first came on the scene, it was one single currency accessible globally to the masses. But actually, what history teaches us, especially being in payments, is there is lots of complexity in terms of the local nuances, whether that's from ecosystems, payments, banking rails, payment rails, etc. But what's interesting, I think, based on what you're describing is, yes, we still need unified infrastructure so you can integrate singly and expand globally. But the requirement for local personalization is still going to be there, in terms of it just depends on the use case based on the demographics and the cultural requirements or nuance requirements in those different jurisdictions. So haven't actually had that discussion with people previously, but that was really interesting for me.
Yeah, well, I'm always happy to have that conversation. I think ultimately, if you're going to be a global provider, you need to understand even the differences in tastes across different geographies, as you mentioned, right? I think some folks you'll notice in certain areas of the world will prefer a certain type of blockchain because that ecosystem has done a great job of onboarding new users, right? And so then you're going to be leveraging the technology and the suite of applications within that ecosystem, as opposed to another one that may be a little bit more differentiated or nuanced. And so ultimately, I think that's the key to winning that business, is saying, well, we have, like you said, a unified integration where you can come in and then sort of drill down and specify against localized demand. I think ultimately, when payments platforms go to any new market, they should be really thinking about that way, because there, as you mentioned, many customs and norms and differentiated approaches to every single jurisdiction, even though they're still using kind of unanimous or universal internet money. So that's the fun game that we get to play.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, just to finish on that, be global, act local, supply and demand, and partner for success. So some really interesting, I think, lessons for the audience to take away from that. I just wanted to finish by saying thanks, Pietro. I really appreciate you taking the opportunity, and we're really thankful for the partnership at Zero Hash between our two companies, and excited to see what we build in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, I would echo the same sentiment. Thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and the team. And likewise, we're very exuberant and ecstatic about the partnership. We're really excited to see what the customer feedback is and intake that feedback to build more diverse and strong products for the future. So couldn't be more excited about this year and the next and the future for what it holds.
Perfect. Thanks for joining, and thanks everyone for listening.